Hello, so in this tutorial I'll teach you how to manage the user permissions inside of your projects. So let's say that inside of your project you have some pages and you want that pages to only be accessible by authenticated users. So in this tutorial I'll teach you how to do that. So let's log in our framework, choosing advanced workspace and the selected projects. And currently we have here our default files with just one page. So for the sake of this tutorial, let's just create some other pages. And let's say that I want the page 1 and the page 2 to only be accessible by authenticated users. Now, of course, that you needed to have here other files so the user could authenticate himself. So let's suppose that you already have that files, and you can have that files just by installing a program from our store, which is the authentication program. We can do that at the end of this tutorial, but for now let's be focused in the user management permissions of these pages. So how can I say that only specific users can have access to these pages? So first of all, we need to go here to this menu, manage users, and I need to explain all these menus here. So first menu, it's the activities. So what are activities? Activities are basically permissions. You can add more, but basically it comes with access, write and delete permissions. Then you can relate these permissions with other objects or with other users. Okay, so these are the permissions, the type of permissions that then you can use in your project. Then you have the user types. User types are simply user profiles. So a user can have one or more profile, and then each profile can have multiple permissions. Then you have the internal users, which are the real users that are registered in your project. So when a user enters in your application, in your project, basically we're going to have some page to log in and probably to register. Or the registration, it could be something, it could be done from an internal panel from some specific authenticated user that can create internal users, example. So all that users that are registered through your application, through your projects, it will appear here. If you want to create them manually, you can always do with this menu here. Additionally, we have external users, which basically are users. We have modules that manage all these menus here automatically, so you don't need to worry about it. But basically this lists all the external users that you have. So you can have, currently we have a module which allows users from Facebook, from Google, from Twitter, from a bunch of other external social networks and other applications, external applications, so to log in your project. So you can install that specific module, and then the external users will be listed here. So basically, if you want to do this manually, of course you needed to know what is the specific fields that you needed to fill. But we have modules that do this automatically. Then you have the user types. Basically it's in here that you relate specific users that are registered in your project with specific profiles. So in here I'm saying that the user that was registered as an admin with the name admin, this user as this profile, the profile admin. If I want to add another profile, I just needed to come here, if I wanted to do this manually, and then select the specific profile and click add, and automatically it will appear here. So this is a manual action that you can do, but we have then modules that they do this automatically, that we can see this later at the end of this tutorial. The important thing is that you understand what these menus do here. The concepts, you need to understand this concept. So the permissions, the type of permissions, which is the activities, then the user profiles, which are the user types that you can have, then the real users, internal or external, and then the relationships between these users and the profile. So a user can have one or more user profile. And then I want to create the specific permissions for the specific profile. So where do I do that? So through this menu here. So if I click this menu, I see here that I have my user profiles, and below I have the pages in my projects. So in here I can select the specific permissions for the specific pages. So I have the permissions that it is in here in the activities. So in here it's the activities that I have created, the three, the access, the write and the delete, and then I can relate these permissions for this specific user profile to these specific pages. In this case are pages, but I could do this for the modules too. So each module has specific permissions too, and additionally I could relate not only for pages but for some other components. So if you go here, add user type activity object, you could do that through that previous interface, or you could do that manually through here, just by choosing the specific permission and the specific object ID. Let's say this, and you put like that. So in here I'm saying that the user profile admin has some write permissions to the article with ID 10. So this is just an example. But we have all the modules. In the modules we have, when you are editing the modules with no code editor, you have some configurations there where the system does this automatically. I'll show then some example at the end of this tutorial. The important thing is that you understand that you have permissions, user profiles, users that can be related with user profiles, and then you have the user profiles then can have permissions related with the specific pages. Then we have the user activities objects list. Basically this allows you, currently we don't have any, but basically this allows us to say that, oh, I want this specific user to have a specific permission for a specific component. So let's say that I want this user. So previously in this we were seeing user types. In here is not for a user type, is not for a user profile. In here is for a real user, for a specific user. We want to say this specific user has access to this specific component. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say that we have a task manager application, and in this task manager application the admin user can create tasks and can assign their tasks to some specific users. So in here, let's say that I have a new activity called assign, and then I'll say, okay, I want to assign a specific task. So in here I'll have another component, another object. So that could be a task, or it could be an article, because an article could be a specific task. And let's say that I want to assign this specific article, this specific task with ID 10 to this specific user, and only this specific user can write in that specific task. So this is basically a manual way to do this. So we have in our modules, again in our modules we have no code editors where you can just configure some settings and automatically the system will do that for you. But in case you want to do this manually, that's where you could do that. Or you could see the relationships for the specific users. This is where you do that. Currently we don't have any. Then we have the objects users list. Basically in here it's where you set the belongings. Let's say that you say that, okay, I want a specific user to be the owner of this specific component. So this is where you can do that manually. Again, we have modules that do this automatically too. So let me give you a simple example. In a blog you have your own blog, so you register as a user and you have your own blog, and inside of that blog you have articles that you can create. So that articles, although be public, so you can publish them and all people can see it, but only you can write it. So that articles belong to you. So you can set before here too, you could set the permissions for writing that articles, but additionally for that you can say this article only belongs to me, and then you can say list the articles that belongs to me, example, and then you can add groups here that basically go to a more granular level where you can say that okay, I want to have to list me only the articles that belong to me, the articles that I created, but for a specific group, which could be for a specific category. Let's say that I want to show only the articles for sports that I created, or only the articles that I created in the category economy. So you can have multiple different groups, and then you can automatically show the articles only for that specific group. So this is optional, but is very useful. Then you have the user environment, which basically in here is, let's say that you have a chat or a forum where you can basically create discussion groups for specific subjects. So in this case, let's say that I have the discussion group A for some subject, and I have the discussion group B for some other subjects. And in one I have some users, and in other I have some other users. So I need to know the users belong to which specific environment, to which specific discussion group. So this is where this is very useful, because you can have an application with a bunch of users, but that users, some part of that users can only belong to a specific environment, and some other users can belong to some other environment, which means that you can have an applications which has individual applications inside of that main application, and then you have users that belongs to some sub applications there, and some other users that belong to some other sub applications too. So you can basically, in here in the user environments, you can basically say that this user belongs to this environment and this other user belongs to these other environments. So again, when you are creating the pages through our modules, in our modules you have settings to do this in a user-friendly way, so you don't need to worry about it. But if you want to manage or to see or to have the history or the log and see what are the users related with what, basically this helps you to track or to check if something is correct or not. So you can do this through here. If you want to do this manually, of course you can always do this manually too, by clicking in the ads environment and do this manually too. This is just an example. Okay, then we have the user sessions, which basically is a log with all the sessions of the use of the login of the authenticated users. So every time that the user authenticates in your app, in your project, automatically will be registered here, where we can see the specific session ID, where we can see if the user is logged in or logged out, we can see when he authenticates, we can see if he how many times he failed to authenticate, if he's logged in, if his username, if it is blocked or not, we can unblock it. So basically this is basically a log which allows you then to edit, to unblock specific sessions, but basically is more for tracking and to have an history of all the sessions that the user did, that the users did. And then at the end we have the settings of this specific module. This is the user module, which allows you to have all these options here, all these menus, and then allows you to have to create a bunch of modules, a bunch of blocks with a bunch of settings, which allows you to do a bunch of things like login, register, manage users, and other things. And these settings is a setting that it will affect how that modules will then behave. In this case we just have one settings, which is the default login session time to leave. Basically when the user logs in, it can have that session during for a moment. So we can say that I want to have to the users to only be logged in for 10 minutes. After that 10 minutes they need to be logged in again. well, 10 minutes is a little bit short. It depends of the type of application that you are doing, but let's say that you want to put it like 24 hours. So this is where you say that, okay, what is the TTL for the sessions, the user sessions? And that's it. So basically I explained to you what these menus do. So if we close this, let's say that currently we have these two pages. So to add the permissions for these two pages, what you needed to do is to come here, manage users, and if you needed to create the users, in this case the user types, the user profiles. If you want to use the defaults, then you can always do, and then you need to come here and say this specific user profile has permission for this and this, and then you needed to save. If you didn't want to do this manually, you could always install a program that already brings a bunch of files with authentication. So you needed to go here, install program, and it automatically shows the programs that we currently have in our store. You needed to choose one, or if you had already the download of that program, you just needed to upload it here, and basically it will install it automatically. So it already started the installation. Basically you needed to select a bunch of settings here, but basically it's just next, next, next. Where basically when it gets to this screen, you need to say, okay, I want the page 1 and the page 2 to be authenticated, and you needed to do continue. Automatically the program, it will be installed successfully, with where you can see that it adds some files in here automatically. That allows you to edit users, edit your profile. So it allows you basically to do a bunch of things, to log in, to register, to log in based in external users, basically choose some external social networks and other things. Then if you want to go back and see what this installation did, you see that in here it automatically creates the permissions for the corresponding user types. So for the admin user type, I can see that it created already the access permission for the specific pages that I selected, and additionally for these ones, which should be private too, which he installed automatically. So basically this is just an example. So in here automatically you basically create you have an applications with user authentication. I have other tutorials that teach you how to do that automatically. This will not be the focus of this tutorial. This is just to show you an example. Let me show you here what I was telling you about related with the no-code editor. So this is a login module which allows you to, based in settings, do a bunch of things, but including it allows you every time that the user logs in, I can set here an environment ID, saying that okay, this user, when it will log in only for in this specific environment. Or when I'm registering a specific user, I can say the same thing. I can say that this user belongs, it will be registered only for this specific environment. So this is where I'll put here the specific environment ID. The environment ID is just numeric fields that you can just put 1, 2, 3 or whatever number you want to. And additionally in here I can relate this specific user. I can say that okay, this specific user belongs to this specific component. So let's say that in here, well, in this case it doesn't make any sense, it makes sense more the opposite, but let's say that I want to say that this user, every time that I create this user, it will belong to this specific article with this in this specific group. So this is just an example. We have other modules, like you have the example if you create if you create a new page, we have an article module, which basically to make more sense this part here. So let's say that if we go to the page 1, if you go to the modules, we have here a module, the article module, where basically if I'm editing a specific article, I can say that okay, I want this article to belong to this specific user, and I could put here user, and then I could put here my logged in user ID. This is just an example. Basically, this is just to explain to you that all these options that I was explaining here, that a user can have, a specific user can have a specific permission for a specific object, or a specific object can belong to a specific user. So instead of doing this manually, you can do this through the modules by filling these options here. Example, other option that we have here is in the user module. You have here a module which basically allows you to validate if an object belongs to a specific user. Through here, I put here my user ID, could be the logged in user, and then I choose the corresponding component here with the corresponding ID. So this is just an example. Or I could validate a specific activity, user activity, saying that, okay, I want this user to be sure that has a specific permission for this specific component. So you have basically modules that allows you, based in the settings, to manage or to inserting these records that I was showing here. So you don't need basically to create anything here. This is just for logging basically. What you need to do here is basically you just need to create the user permissions. Well, you need to create the permissions, you need to create the user profiles, and then the specific user permissions for that specific profiles. That's what you basically you needed to do. All the rest, you have modules that do this automatically. Additionally, let me show you so this working. So basically what we did in summary was to create 2 pages to install a program so we can have some authenticated files automatically in our application, and then in theory we create the admin user and that bunch of user profiles and a bunch of permissions, and then we relate the access permission for a specific user profile in these 2 pages. So that means that if I try to see my applications, currently we'll see with the default template, so we need to install a new template, but just to see, we'll see just this. So so I can show you what this does, let me just install a new template. So if I try to preview this page, nothing will happen. So let me just install a new template here. So if I go here to the page, that's where we are, the page 1. Let's install a new template. Let's choose that template. Okay, let's save this page. So these guys here, the login page needs to have these templates, and then all the other pages can have other templates. So in here, if I log in with the user that we created, the admin user, if I do the login, automatically I'll see the dashboard here. Well, obviously there I needed to have a menu here to go to the page 1 and the page 2, but let's just do this manually. So if I do now the preview, I can see that it shows me here the page 1, and automatically, because I installed this authenticated program, it gives me already this page is the profile page, the manage users, where I can add new users, or that I can edit some current users that I have. So basically you can change all of this, but basically this program, it comes with this by default. If I'm logged out and if I try to access this page here, it won't let me. So it will say user not allowed, and it will redirect me to the login. So basically that's it. So basically we create 2 pages We create the users and then we relate that user types with these specific pages. So as you can see, it's very easy how to create applications with authentication just by drag and dropping and installing programs, and just by creating things here and then manage the users through the manage user pop-up or the user panel. And that's it. So thank you very much.